Hi everyone. A very good afternoon to you all. I am Sejal Shibe from Cyberfrat and I welcome you all to the Wednesday Wisdom webinar that is on the topic Workforce Cyber Intelligence and Security. So Wednesday Wisdom is a webinar series that Cyberfrat is doing with our association partner Onefede. With Wednesday Wisdom, we would like to demonstrate the best of breed next generation technologies which enable your business to transform digitally, acquire compliance, and more importantly, mitigate the upcoming cybersecurity risk. So for today's webinar, we have with us the solution expert partner DTex. DTex is committed to helping enterprises run safer and smarter by providing context-rich user behavior and asset utilization analytics that deliver a first-of-its-kind human-centric approach to enterprise operational intelligence. And joining from DTex as our guest speaker is Mr. Remon, Insider Risk Specialist. As an investigator and former law enforcement officer, Remon has conducted several hundred digital forensic investigations, including but not limited to fraud, hacking, malware, and information system security. So that was about Mr. Remon. Also, we will be doing a Kahoot quiz after the presentation. And the three winners of Kahoot gets Amazon Kindles. So stay tuned for that. And also you will be getting a participation certificate if you fill the feedback form that will be posted in the chat box. And the winner of the Wheel of Fortune for that also gets some Cyberfrat goodies. So don't miss all of that out. And yeah, before we start, let me just invite Mr. Dushyant Parikh from Onefede to speak a few words. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Sejal. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining on this episode of Wednesday Wisdom. It's been, I think, a great success so far. We already had, 4 episodes on, past 4 Wednesday. And, this is, I think, the 5th episode of Wednesday Wisdom. And we are quite happy, with the kind of participation we are getting, on every episode of Wednesday Wisdom. So thank you, Cyberfrat team, for organizing this tech series called Wednesday Wisdom. And I would also like to thank Remon for taking out time from his busy schedule and throw some light on this topic of workforce cyber intelligence and security, as DTex has one of the best or unique value proposition and a unique solution to address the this particular issue. So thanks once again everyone on this call today. Just a couple of words about Onefede, as maybe some of you who already had participated earlier already knows that Onefede is a B2B cybersecurity marketplace, which is kind of an ecosystem of all the stakeholders in cybersecurity domain, including the solution OEMs or service providers, the solution buyers, the influencers, consultants, everyone. And we basically aim to bridge the gap, between our customers and the niche and emerging or disruptive, innovative cybersecurity solution and service providers to bring them on one platform. That's the aim of Onefede. And we encourage all of you to visit Onefede website, register yourself, and you can post your requirements or the pain problems or the kind of solutions you are looking at to address the specific problem areas in cybersecurity, and we would be happy to work with you and bring you innovative and niche solutions that can address those specific areas. So feel free to reach out to us either on our website onefede.com, or you can also send us email. My email ID is dushyant@saram.co.in. Okay. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Remon to take us through today's topic, okay, which is on the, as I mentioned, workforce cyber intelligence and security. So over to you, Remon. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dushyant. And thank you all for attending this webinar. I truly feel honored that you are making time in your agendas that are likely even more busy than mine. So really appreciate it. just explain, I'm an inside risk specialist doing lots of things within DTex, basically anything but sales. So this is not going to be a very commercial presentation. I actually would like to have some emphasis on what workforce cyber intelligence and security means to us in the area of cyber intelligence and insider risk in general. So I will take you through a few slides to explain what it is, what it's not, and how it's making a difference for our customers, but also our technology partners. Will not be a very slide intensive presentation. And again, my aim is to provide you with a good understanding, mainly on how human behavior can be leveraged to detect threats pretty much early on and mitigate it more adequately. And I think what is really important to me, being based out of the Netherlands, Europe, through a very privacy sensitive approach. Now I'm realizing that within your region, privacy is also a big topic nowadays, and that remains, it's likely only getting more important over time. After a couple of slides, I will skip to a demo just to show you how we put this all in practice, to give you some sense. I can talk for hours on that, but I will only show you the tip of the iceberg to get a bit of a grasp. So workforce cyber intelligence and security is basically a term that we came up with that describe a risk-based approach to human behavior. It recognizes that the human is the most important element, basically, of every enterprise and organization, and we tend to see it as a missing link, not so much the weakest, which, as we all know as security professionals, the human tends to be the weakest link in everything we do. But we actually, we understand that, and we don't see it differently than you do. But we would like to change that around and use that human behavior to our advantage. So what we do is we focus on human intent, and that intent can be, malicious activity, or it could be benign activity, users just trying to do their jobs. It's just a different kind of intent. We would like to differentiate between those two. We'll come to that in a few minutes. We would like to know how they interact with data, but also with machines and applications. So it's not just what finding out what the user is doing. It's a much broader perspective. So, it all boils down to data, machines, applications that they don't have arms and legs, hands or feet. They simply tell what a human user tells them what to do, right? So understanding that human intent is the most important element, we think, of your ability to identify and stop insider threats. And also to prevent data loss and protect users from external compromise. Now, being a long time investigator throughout my career, I think proving intent of a suspect or someone under investigation is the most difficult thing to do. And you always have to rely on available log files and that sort of thing, forensic artifacts that are sitting on systems or wherever that may be. And it just takes a lot of time and effort, typically. So at DTex, we believe that the human element must be at the center of your security architecture. So if we just briefly, really, I'm not going deep into these numbers, but just exploring the human element using the last couple of years, for example, where we have that remote workforce, people after the pandemic, the visibility that was lessened by that, we had to take that for granted. What we saw that typically that VPNs were being bypassed on a regular basis. And within our own DTex, we call it the I3 investigations team that I'm part of. we actually found that in every 2 employees, they intentionally disabled VPN, especially in the first few weeks after that COVID-19 pandemic started to take place. Which at first I thought, well, that's quite a high number, but it was actually the case for most of our customers at least. Now we have those rise and breach data report. There's many reports out there that basically tells you the same thing. It's human decisions, it's users' activity. It boils down to the instructions they give machines and how they use the data. That is the root cause of nearly every new exposure or change in risk posture and ultimately a breach. Now, we talk a lot about a breach and data exfiltration, which is really important to most organizations, but we're not excluding the compromise of availability and integrity at the same time. So just briefly, here's what we see today in a common enterprise architecture. There tends to be, when we started out maybe 10, 15 years ago, even earlier, there was quite a bit of focus on malware, being able to detect those knowns and unknowns in that. There is, and this is really high level, data focus, where we rely on existing log files, whether that's system or application log files. And yeah, you're probably thinking the idea of identifying human behavior as input to cybersecurity or a way to measure your risk posture is nothing new. I was saying the same thing before starting at DTex, as UEBA or UBA was supposed to deliver that already. And that's spot on if that's what you're thinking. But unfortunately, UEBAs typically rely on cyber sensors, not so much on human telemetry, to try to understand that human behavior and what that means to your organizational risk. Now, as I mentioned, these sensors rely on log files and events of different kinds. And the unfortunate part of that is that they tend to be really noisy and can lead to false positives. But those, in our opinion, are not true indicators of human intent. In fact, the traditional approaches were so bad that Gartner eliminated the whole category altogether from their research. So when we look at these originating, those source log files and events, what we at DTex thought was missing was really key pieces of data. And it's that key piece of data that we started to collect. We developed technology that's currently patented, that is not relying on these sort of cyber, let's call them cyber sensor or log files that maybe originated from operating systems or applications. That can, I think, can really, it can be beneficial to get some understanding of human behavior, but it's just, it's not complete. So this sort of missing quadrant that you see in the upper right hand, I don't think it's so much missing because there are solutions like user activity monitoring, data loss prevention tools, UBAs, as I mentioned, and also forensics can really help to get an understanding of that human focus, that, or at least I should say that human behavior. Now, what I think, coming from a forensic background, which I really love to do, it really tends to be slow. It takes a lot of time making those forensic acquisitions, those forensic copies, analyzing the data. There's a whole process going on. And the main thing is it's pretty much post-mortem, these investigations, the whole incident response bit and the whole follow-up. Now, the other thing is what I was constantly, to my frustration, I was always relying on what is there at a customer to review. Now, I did that within law enforcement prior to DTex. I worked at FireEye Mandiant. We had those same challenges. So what we think is pretty much the same with DLP. It's sort of legacy solutions that can be largely ineffective, or maybe even more important, are not very privacy sensitive. And yeah, today that is really an issue. So DTex introduced workforce cybersecurity and intelligence. You can name it whatever you want to be, whatever you want it to be, threat intelligence. But it's basically threat intel coming from your workforce, whether that's employees, maybe former employees, contractors, subcontractors. And we solve the visibility challenge by focusing on those human indicators and of intent. And we do that in near real time. Whether that's logging in from an unusual location, aggregating data, exfiltrating files. We assign risk scores based on those human actions. Now, those could be trigger-based, but we leverage that as well. But triggers can potentially lead to a lot of false positives. So we also look at behavior deviations. So we baseline user behavior and we compare it to that user's baseline. But we do the same thing for that specific user in comparison to the rest of the organization, or even more so, compare it to the peer group that the user is in. Because a user using, for example, Wireshark, which is a network analyzing tool, as you will probably know, that by itself, I don't want to be alerted on if that is sitting or being used by a network administrator. If that is used by someone within marketing, you probably do want to know. So what is really important in that regard is having that visibility, having that context around certain activity, and not only doing that trigger-based. So what we aim to do is, and the same for data loss, which I just mentioned, it's just not coping. It's really slow and impactful, and we are relying on classification, scanning of files and content, which impacts the performance of your systems quite a bit, including the network. But it's also, from a privacy perspective, it can be, for a lot of organizations at least, that we see, that can be a thing, because you don't know what kind of data you're scanning in the first place, just not really working. So we wanted to use a different approach. Now, I've added a few slides which I just briefly want to touch on. So this is Article 25 of the GDPR, General Data Protection Act, which I marked just a few things that a controller or someone processing data needs to take into account the state of art. So where is technology today? What is available? And is it proportional for your organization? You don't want to be, if you have a really small team, maybe a small customer base, you're not expected to spend millions, right? So not sure if you have to deal with the GDPR, but I know, for example, within India, there's a similar, I think there's a lot of similarity in other regions as well, including the UK, that are based on the same principles. So when we think of state of art, I think we really think that this is the way to go. Now, we take into regard the scope of the data that we collect and process, and also the purpose. Now, the whole idea around privacy by design, which is baked in our solution and should basically be in any solution, even if it already existed prior to privacy law, we have to take that into account, maybe rebuild the system. And it's really important, and I can't stress that enough, and I'm not a legal counselor or a lawyer, that privacy by default, we don't often see that in solutions. So even though you can opt out or disable certain features, really need to have a solution that by default doesn't do anything and forces you as a customer to consider what it is you're actually trying to solve, what use cases or risk are you trying to mitigate. Having appropriate technical organizational measures to protect the data that you've collected. Now think of an Article 25 and also 32 of the GDPR refers to pseudonymization, which is actually sort of similar like anonymization, which is something we both offer. So we encrypt everything we collect, but we also have the option of anonymizing all PII, anything that refers back or enables you to identify a person, a natural person, you can fully anonymize that. So it will be hashed. And yeah, in the end, there's never a guarantee, because if you have enough data, you collect a lot of data of a user and you do profiling, you may be able to aggregate that user, but it has to be do around, it has to be proportional. Now, with pseudonymization, you actually hold a key or a pair of keys, like DTex does, to enable you to, which is not really a word that I'm going to use right now, to de-anonymize the data. So when you collect all that sensitive information, you can actually, if the risk is that high that you need to escalate, or you need to find out, who is responsible or what device is leaking information, that based on those different keys, you can have one sitting at your CISO, for example, or maybe HR director, and the other within legal. If they both decide this is urgent enough, we have enough ground to de-anonymize the data. They can both put in their keys, and then you can see what user for a certain amount of time, what user or devices or data was implicated. Now, other things that I'm not going to dig into too much, but really make sure that if privacy is a concern for you, for your organization, if you're a public, maybe, if you're working in Secret Service, you still have a lot of data to protect. There may be other approaches to this, but typically you don't want to collect an unnecessary amount of data. Not only will that impact your performance, it will also, the chance will be higher that if there is a data breach that is leaking information, you can limit that amount. And also, with regard to purpose, what we see a lot that, and that can be debatable. I think if you repurpose data that you collected in the first place for a different purpose. So let's say OS log file, your syslog or Windows event logs, or maybe using some other applications, and then you repurpose that data by processing it for security means, it often is not very much in compliance with the law. At least that's my personal opinion. So we have to really take care of that and think twice. Some of the data processing principles. Now we have a lot of organizations say we are fully GDPR compliant. I would say they at best are GDPR ready. So it's not just a technical solution. The whole being compliant also involves the organizational pieces. Within DTex, we have taken all of these into account and made sure we are as compliant as possible, and it's up to the customer then to use this in the right way. But by default, make sure if you're collecting stuff that when you roll out the solution, don't collect anything at all, and make sure you focus on what's really necessary in order to be compliant. And if there are any questions at some point, let me know. Please let me know after this presentation. I just wanted to move on really quickly and explain how DTex is doing that. Again, I'm not trying to sell it to you, but we collect metadata, which is not, metadata is data about the actual data. So we don't look into files. We just collect that metadata that is important to us to focus on that human behavior. Whether that's, we're quite platform agnostic. We don't care what you're running, whether that's Windows, Mac, or Linux, whether it's a workstation, fat client, or server, VDI, cloud instances, etc. So you want to have a broad, really broad perspective. Now, the data that we collected, again, it's patented. It's near real time. So we collect the data on a really small footprint. So when you talk about data minimization, on average, we collect between 3 to 5 megabytes per user per day. And as it is only metadata, we can have that small footprint. We also, again, tend to filter out any noise, anything we don't need that would just be noisy and blurring our view, we want to get rid of. only the stuff that really matters to you. And in the end, we don't want to impact any employee productivity or endpoint performance. On average, it's only 0.5 CPU increase, so the user wouldn't notice. That means every minute, the data that we collect on the endpoint, that is encrypted in a local database and is then by default every 60 seconds, but you can fully change that around if you want to. That's being sent over TLS connections or encrypted connections to the backend, where and the reason I'm mentioning that is we're actually going to show you a demo of that, looking at that backend where all the analytics of that data takes place. Now, again, we use encryption, pseudonymization, and anonymization, and we focus on insider threats. So anything a user does that is tricky, whether that's user and employee or a former employee, contractors, we really, we do care about our customers, but it's the same to us. We know you trust your users and we don't want to be big brother on them. So we only take the least amount of data possible. From a DLP perspective, where we focus on data, we take a different approach. If a customer already has classified the data, which is a huge effort, we take that, we can ingest those classification labels, but again, we look at the behavior of data, and we are well recognized by many vendors and technology research companies say, well, this is a different approach, looking at the behavior without actually knowing the content of the file. So we're scoring risky behavior and abnormal data that I will show in the demo as well. Accounts can be compromised. You don't want to be ending up apprehending a user, I would say, for doing malicious stuff or anything that harms the organization if the user is actually not responsible for that. Maybe if it's really negligent behavior and you want to know. So we match the possible compromise activity to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And actually MITRE is a technology partner of us that we work with to enhance insider risk for organizations. Now, in the meantime, while collecting all this metadata, we built a full forensic audit trail of that metadata, which gives you so much visibility that we've seen it used by customers in court cases. It really holds up well, and you have a full picture. Even with that metadata, it's so clear that many different courts actually use that to make informed decisions in their cases. Compliance is another topic. So I mentioned integration pieces. We mentioned some of our technology partners on this slide, CrowdStrike and Splunk, but it's again maybe good to point out those and many others will have a UEBA solution, but have recognized, yes, but this is something entirely different. But we basically integrate with anything. I'm starting to sound like sales, so I'm going to stop here and I'll move over to the demo. I will bring up my. So I'm now actually looking at the user interface, the web interface of our demo environment, which is, again, we don't do anything else on the endpoints other than just collecting those tiny bits, those bytes every minute on the user system and then sending it back for analytics on the backend. Now, logging in on the backend, now we can do so, interact with it through APIs and that sort of thing, typical stuff that you would see. I'm now using the web interface. And what you'll see here is that I'm brought into the Intercept Control Center. Intercept is the name of our one of our solutions. The control center basically consists of a dashboard, of which we have a couple of hundreds of, that holds information that is important to you as a user of the system. Now, we have rule-based access. We can have various roles. So I'm logged in as Remon Verkerk, and I pretty much have sort of, escalated privileged rights to the system, but you can limit access to certain information. So you can have analysts looking at only specific users or user groups. You can have cybersecurity team that are not looking at alerts that are not relevant to them. But I'll I'll move on and just explain to you, give you some sense of how we can leverage this data. So what we see right here to start off with, we have a DTex benchmark score, which at the moment is really a score based on, we aim to have high fidelity alerts, on average about 2.5 alerts per 1,000 users per day. We don't want to be adding to that alert fatigue. So we want to give good alerts and actually get rid of customer noise that is there in the first place. Now, what is more important to me as an analyst is that I see the current risk profile for this user. Now, this demo system, I forgot to say, actually hold customer data, that, you know, the names of the innocent or not so innocent users in here have all been changed, but it's actually stuff that was captured at various customers that authorized us to use this. This is the current risk score, which is not that bad, I guess. But we saw that this is based on the past 30 days. So if I exit full screen here, you can see set to the last 30 days. We can change that however we wanted to. But in the previous 30 days, this was actually lower. So there has been some increase. We have an overview in this visualization, all based on Kibana. I can mention. We've been deploying to this amount of systems, Mac, Windows, VDI, that sort of thing. Now, we have these different categories of risk that we defined. Maybe risk is not the right word. I could call them buckets. But what you will see here is that we have malicious behavior in the last 30 days. And just by hovering over these circles, these dots, some of them are bigger depending on the impact or the activity count, we could see that this behavior is based on what we call indicators of intent. So if we have a user obfuscating, maybe covering their tracks, deleting a lot of stuff that we think, you know, with having the right context, it looks like this user is intentionally doing stuff, it's get flagged and put in this category. Now, you would probably have a different conversation with this intentional or malicious user than you would have with a non-malicious user trying to do his or her job, but maybe acting in a way that is not compliant to your organization's security policy or privacy policy. So for this user, you know, you may want to end up sending out a teachable moment, aim them towards their security policy to, you know, run through it again, or maybe adjust your security awareness program. We have compromised behavior, again, pretty much fully mapped to the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. And this is very high level information. We all have all the details in the forensic audit trail, but I'm just hovering over this. Anything that we see here, we can interact with. We can use these as filters or filter out stuff. From a data loss behavior perspective, and we'll come to DLP in a little bit, you know, we often get asked, how is that different from our NDR, that sort of thing. So we want to be as close to the user and the devices as possible, whether that's on a user device or a server, because we don't want to, and we want to capture it all, or at least as much as possible, whether it's removable devices, Bluetooth transfers, airdrop transfers, we've seen it all, and we're going to capture it all. Now, there is a separate risk indicators that we typically don't alert on, and that could be, let's see what's in here. It could be flight risk. You know, if someone's looking for a new job, you typically don't want to get alerted on. You know, it's their in most regions their right to do so. But we also know that flight risk, you know, prior to leaving an organization in the 30 days prior to that, or sometimes longer, a lot of users tend to be taking data with them, whether that's intentionally or they think they are entitled to having that data, which is often not the case. So these could be early warning, act as early warning systems, early warning signs that something is going on. Now, again, alerting on this is not very favorable unless you have time on your hand and you don't care much about privacy, but it's all around the context of that, and we'll dig into that. A few more visualizations I want to show. We have a timeline visualization for the past 30 days. Now, from an analyst perspective, I could go to the alert page, which I will show in a bit. But just looking at these visualizations, if I wanted to start somewhere, I may want to start with this peak here, right here. And we see these different colors in these stacks actually refer back to the different categories. So here we have that dark red, which is malicious or intentional behavior. We have a lighter red, which stands for data loss. We also have some potential other risk indicators like flight risk. I could use this to zoom in to this specific time to see what's going on. And now we enabled a filter that was adjusted to this time span. And now we have much less bubbles. We could still archive creation, obfuscated internet file upload, data encryption, which doesn't necessarily have to mean someone's doing something malicious, but with the right context, it appears to be so. Access to pirated media files, network surface scanning by R. Lambert. We'll keep that user in mind, and other exfiltration bits. Now, scrolling down with this filter still active, we see 3 risky users, at least the top 3 that stand out. One being R. Lambert with a total user risk score of 220. You know, that would be a good place to start for me as an analyst. We have S. Palmer. Now, this sort of looked like an Apple Watch face to me. And again, these colors refer back. So we have a full circle of malicious. We have a full circle of data loss. And there's, you know, just this tiny dot of negligent or unintentional behavior. So what I can do is click on this user R. Lambert. And I have to be conscious of time, and please hold me if my time is up, but I will speed up this process. I'm now zoomed in on Lambert, and I will see all the activity that's tied to that user. Still high level, I'm not seeing any details yet. I can see risky apps. Now, Chrome and Explorer, that sort of thing, is benign, right? But there are behaviors tied to that are risky, and therefore for this user, it is relevant to be looking at. We have share enum, which is a tool by sysinternals to scan for open shares on the network. Verkerk and WinRAR, 2 devices in this time span that was used. And we have data at risk. So we have that resume. And again, this data is tied to risky behavior that we saw. I don't know the content. I can guess for this resume what the content is, but we can't look into the data. So this one stands out, confidential design files.rar. That archive has been renamed. So it's not been extracted, it's been renamed to my favorite cars.pdf. Now let's quickly zoom into that. By clicking on that file, we are taken to a new dashboard, which tells us the file lineage of this file. So what we can see on this timeline is that R. Lambert actually renamed, at this point in time, renamed confidential design files.rar to my favorite cars.pdf. Now going back to that, the creation early on by R. Lambert of this file, after creating this file, actually these 3 files were read into the archive. So the name gives it away, easy to trigger on a rule, but if this was a different name, we would still be triggering it just the same. Now, if I scroll down, you know, we can actually see that in the end, the user used Chrome to actually upload this file, the PDF file, exfiltrated it out of the network, and then deleted the file. I need about 1 minute. I don't know what merger model contains. What I do know that based on the sensitivity scoring that we calculate, this one has the highest score. Now, we do that by, for example, we saw the aggregation. We tie all the behavior, the human risky behavior, and to this data. And we can see there were only 2 unique users using this file. Looking at brain trust, there was 1 individual that created this file and accessed the file previously. That is a sensitive user. So it is maybe a board member or such a thing. So depending on the different behaviors, the file versions and so forth, there's a lot of algorithms going on. if a user in this case uses Microsoft classification tool, we can ingest those as well. This file needs our attention. If we click through on it, we'll actually be seeing only Lambert was using that. He didn't even read the file. So that's not normal behavior, and it will only increase the total risk score. Yeah, I will be skipping some information that I was intended to show you, like the alert page. What I do want to show, though, one last thing is that I am able to provide a report to my HR director or my senior manager for Lambert in only a couple of seconds. So what I could do is click on, you see here some more details. And there's actually, if I click on this square, we can see all the details that was captured on this very specific event that took place. We're only showing the stuff that we deem relevant, but it's all there for us to investigate. Now, clicking on our Lambert will actually take me to the user timeline dashboard, which gives us much more context on what's happened. So these all look familiar by now. And we saw that on the same day, August 9, well, in this area, especially around August 19, we have flight risk. Previously, we see access to webmail, but also exfiltration, the scanning, all this behavior that we tagged one after the other. This provides a lot of context. Now, again, would I be going to the alert page and look at our Lambert? It could be that we say, well, what was this posting to a website or security bypass research? Just by clicking on this link, I will be brought to that more detailed level of information, where we see, well, we actually captured a window title. Based on the window title, we can capture what the user was looking for. Now, this could also be done by capturing the URL, for example. So this would be reason enough for me to say, well, let's write a report for our Lambert and have maybe a senior manager decide on how to move forward and escalate this if necessary. Well, we were here. We can now say, well, let's write that report, go to a different dashboard, which holds all the relevant metrics. And then last but not least, I will be hitting a button to download this user report. Now, this is demo environment, takes a little bit longer as there's a lot of interaction with it, but it will typically only take me a few seconds to deliver. And what you will see, in contrast to what I was saying earlier in the slides, we can see the domain name and the username. Now, typically by default, when we roll this out, you will not be able to see that. You will be seeing a random hash. Now, just by looking at the random hash, you can decide on this report that's now ready, all the information that we saw earlier, and a description of the user activity that we detected in a more human readable way. The malicious stuff, the use of the Verkerk, all the obfuscation that took place prior to exfiltration that not much DLP would have been able to capture by that, is now there within a couple of seconds. With that, conscious of time, I will stop here. Again, there's many more dashboards and all the detail you need as an analyst. And I would hand back and hoping that this was helpful and useful to you. Thank you for your time so far.
Thanks, Remon. That was an amazing session, and the demo was really helpful too, I believe. I would request the participants to put their questions or anything that they want to ask to the speaker directly. So we can just address all the questions that you might have. So let's just start putting in the questions.
I see there are a couple of questions, I think already. Does this product need agent
Actually,
From
Manish has put an
yeah.
answer to that.
Yeah. Manish already answered that, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so we tend not to call it an agent because it doesn't do anything other than we tend to call it a dumb collector, but you know that's just semantics. So you could say yes, it is an agent, but it is that live way, just collecting a few bytes and sending it off. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Mr. Raghavendra. Can this solution catch details if someone is browsing in incognito mode?
Can you repeat that last bit? If the user is browsing, what?
In the incognito or private the browser.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really important one. As we not too long ago apprehended it was a Chinese citizen, not that it matters, but for this case, that was doing espionage within an Australian bank that was actually doing that. So we captured that. Now that by itself doesn't necessarily have to be alerted on, in my personal opinion. We see a lot of users doing such a thing, accessing personal webmail, which could be fine for your organization, but we do tag it. So once we see other, risky behavior, that would just increase the risk score for that user because all the events are correlated, and that could end up a user downloading Tor, like the Onion network, for example, or downloading or uploading stuff to their personal webmail sites. Now then you get to a certain threshold where you say, now we're kicking off an alert, and then the use of the incognito mode can provide you with additional context of what the user is trying to achieve and could give you visibility on the user's intent. Good question.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question is from Ms. Divya. How will you capture the document leaving the organization that are internal to the organization? Watermarking or cache by phrase? What are the methods here?
Yeah, again, so again, a very good question. So we don't rely on watermarking, classification, that sort of thing. If the customer has such a thing, we can include, so we can ingest third-party metadata. But again, we look at the behavior, who created the file, how is it interacted with? Is it now interacted with from a different geolocation or by someone in the organization that's using the data in a different way or has never accessed the data? So we all take that into account to build that sort of sensitivity score for the data. And what we offer is, let's call them zones of trust, where we can say, if a user is acting risky, we think, well, is that user supposed to act in that fashion, whether that's related to data or applications? We can give a notice so that the user ends up in the first zone. We give out a teachable moment. If the user continue doing risky stuff, what we don't want to do is end up in that exfiltration stage. So we give out early warnings, we can give notice to the user, and also we can then limit access to resources or applications for that user. So we don't want to go from 0 to 100 in a few seconds just by blocking access entirely. We can do user or device lockout, but we tend to be more gradual. But it's up to the customer's discretion on how aggressive, so to speak, they want to be. But we want to deter the user as much as possible, and if necessary, make sure the exfiltration doesn't happen. If it does happen, we will have a full audit trail in place. The false positive rate, one of the other questions I see coming in, is really low. Now, having worked for Blue Coat Company, FireEye, that's what they all tend to say, right? The fact that we have the right information to start with really helps us to drill down on those false positives. It still is important that we make sure you're looking at the right information. We tune out the noise when we do the deployment. But the comparison against other users within the organization, especially within peer groups, helps even more to get rid of those false positives. So when I say, and you don't have to trust me on my blue eyes, but that our false positive rate is extremely low, it actually is. When we do see a false positive for a customer, we can very easily whitelist that, and the system will also do that in an automated fashion. So we don't offer optical character recognition because that would still rely on content pretty much, which we don't. We capture metadata, so we can use rules that say anything that, specific repositories or file shares or file names, anything that holds confidential or secretive, we can trigger on those, but we just don't want to rely on that. And same for OCR. We don't look into files that privacy unfriendly, in my personal opinion.
Thank you. So before we move on to the next question, I would just request the participants to fill the feedback form. You will also receive a participation certificate after you fill it. And yeah, we have a question from Karishma. Can we have customized regex for DLP widgets?
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah.
I
The question
apologize.
is from Karishma. Can we have customized regex for DLP?
Yeah, so frankly, anything is pretty much, except for the analytics engine, is customizable. So customized regex for DLP, I think that's seen from a traditional DLP perspective, where again, we don't want to, we're not looking at content. So we can regexes to search through or trigger on the metadata that we collect, but it is not something that we do on content. Neither do we do any content discovery like you would do in an early phase. So to us, DLP for compliance purposes, fine, but for our, we are working with the, for example, the top 3 largest banks in the world. To them, at that scale, where we talk about hundreds of thousands of endpoints, it just doesn't scale. So the proof is in the pudding, I agree, but I am convinced that this is the way to go. And regex is great technology, but it's slow if you're working on file content.
Okay, so Mr. Hemang is asking, is the solution compatible with all flavors of Linux?
No. Yeah, okay. We can make it compatible with all flavors. There's just too much work. There's too many flavors out there. So by default, we support CentOS, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We're now currently working on Ubuntu because we had a customer requesting that. It will work, if you ask me, it will work on most of these flavors, but in order for us to officially support it, we need to do some checking. And typically for our customers, we have customers that we start out by deploying on endpoints, user endpoints, and we have some that, especially where they want to have a lot of intellectual property to protect, where they say, well, we start with servers. Now, typically those servers are Red Hat or CentOS, and that's the main reason for us to head that way.
Okay, thank you. The last question for the day is from Mr. Nikhil. What is the memory and CPU usage? Is there lags while capturing data? And what is the minimum configuration for the agent?
Yeah, it is that limited actually. And now we have working with these financial institutions and some large governments, for example, that we're really stressing, nobody wants yet another agent on their system. So we can prove when we say the CPU impact on average is less than 0.5, we have to differentiate, is that just a fat client, a workstation of a user, or is that a server? That will be different. But again, the only thing that collector is doing is collecting a certain amount of information. What information, to what extent, and size is up to the customer. So we do a recommendation, but you can limit it as much as possible. That sort of callback to that backend where the analytics is being done, automatically it's set to every 60-second data sent back. We have customers that have increased it to 120 seconds, every 2 minutes, because every time you connect back, there will be a little bit of overhead from the TLS connection, for example. But the longer you wait with sending back the data, the less near real-time detection you would have. As it is only plain text, like in JSON, encrypted JSON format that we send back and have to analyze, the analytics is done really quickly. The backend is more hefty, of course, but you can have that sitting in, for example, our AWS instance. You can have it on-prem, especially for government customers. Have it in your own cloud. But performance-wise and with regard to scale, it is pretty much limitless. Our largest customer has we have deployed over 720,000 endpoints without any problem, and we are not near any limitations on that. So the backend is fully scalable, and that's about it. So scalability and privacy are for us the unique selling points, actually.
Okay. Thank you, Remon. So with that, I think we have answered the questions that we got. So thank you, Remon. Thank you for taking this session and being here. We really loved having you with us for this session, and I hope you had a great time here.
Yeah, it was fantastic, even though I did most of the talking, but I really, again, I can't emphasize enough, appreciate the time you've all taken. Be happy to answer any questions after this meeting. I'll put my email address in the, if you don't already have it, in the chat as well. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Remon. So with that, we will just move on to the Kahoot quiz. But before that, just a quick reminder to fill the feedback form and just allow us 2 minutes to run the Kahoot quiz for you. Okay, so you just have to go to the website www.kahoot.it and you have to enter the game pin that you can see on the screen. We will just wait for 2 minutes. Please quickly join the quiz, which will be based on the presentation that just happened. So 3 top winners will get Amazon Kindles. So hurry up and join the platform. Yes, we will be doing the Wheel of Fortune after this Kahoot quiz. Okay, just 1 more minute and then we will start the quiz. So you have to, so the rules for this quiz are very simple. You just have to be very quick with your answers. It will be dependent on the fastest finger first. So that's how the scores will look like. Okay, last 30 seconds. Guys, please try to enter your full name so that we don't have any issues with the winners or anything. The scoreboard. Okay, so we'll just start in the next 10 seconds, last 10 seconds. I hope. Yeah, please don't put any answers in the chat. Thank you, Abhishek sir, for the reminder. Okay, let's start. Okay, so the first question is, DTex collector support deployments too? Okay, so Rajesh Panchal is at the top of the scoreboard. Let's see how this moves on. Two key concepts that define a virtual workforce solution to fully understand and quickly track data loss events. Okay, that was, I think, a close one. Oh, so Amit Jain has gone to the top now. The third question. Which of the following approaches does not create an abundance of false positive when profiling data? Okay, Amit Jain is still at the top. Abhishek Mathur and Karishma are at the second and third position. Choose two data processing principles that quite unique characterizes the DTex platform. Okay. Amit Jain is still at the top, and Karishma and Say are at the second and third positions, respectively. And the last question, which is one of the key objectives of a workforce cyber intelligence and security solution to provide. Okay, this will be the deciding question. Okay, so let's see who are the three winners. At the third position is Krishna Kumar Jhala. Congrats, sir. The second position, Mahindra. And at the first top position is Amit Jain. Congratulations to all the winners. My team will get in touch with you for getting your addresses. Mr. Mahindra, can you just put in your full name in the chat? That would be helpful. Okay, with that, thank you for participating in the quiz. And with that, we are left with the Wheel of Fortune, which will be based on the feedback form. So let's just run the wheel. Oh, okay, Mahindra Soni. Okay, sir, got it. Okay, so let's spin the wheel and let's see who gets to win amazing CyberFrat goodies. There will be one winner from this Wheel of Fortune. Okay, so it seems like Mr. Krishna Kumar has won this round as well, but just to be fair with everyone, we'll just redo this one. Thank you, sir. Okay, so let's see. Congratulations, Karishma. The team will get in touch with you for the address details. With that, thank you, participants, for joining. You're always such a lovely audience. We really enjoy conducting these sessions for you. Keep joining in, and we will see you next Wednesday. Until then, take care and have a good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sejal, once again, and thanks, Remon, and all the participants. Do join us for the upcoming webinars as well. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Bye all.